My father celebrated his 56th birthday with a lavish dinner at a Michelin star restaurant surrounded by my mother, my brother, and my sister. I was not invited. Instead, I found out through a social media post where he uploaded a perfect family photo with a caption that read, "All my children have made me proud, except for the single mother who brought shame to this family." I stayed quiet. I did not leave an angry comment or shed a single tear. Weeks later, I showed up at his sprawling estate. When he saw me step out of a black armored vehicle with my men, the color completely drained from his face. He realized in that exact moment that the daughter he discarded as a failure was actually the one holding his entire financial future and his freedom in her hands. My name is Kelsey. I am 33 years old, and I learned the hard way that blood does not always mean loyalty. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic relatives who underestimated your worth and tried to break your spirit. Growing up in an affluent Connecticut neighborhood, my family was obsessed with appearances. My father, Harrison, ran a luxury wealth management firm and demanded absolute perfection. When my ex-husband abandoned me while I was pregnant, my father decided I was a liability. He treated my divorce not as a personal tragedy, but as a public embarrassment that tarnished his reputation. Since then, I had been effectively exiled, expected to hide in the shadows, so my older brother Cameron and my younger sister Ashley could shine. It was a crisp Saturday morning in Manhattan. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, casting long golden shadows across the hardwood floors. I was standing in my kitchen, flipping blueberry pancakes for my 6-year-old son Leo. The smell of butter and maple syrup filled the air, creating a warm, peaceful atmosphere. Leo sat at the kitchen island, his small legs kicking back and forth as he played educational games on his tablet. He was a sweet, observant child who understood far more than a boy his age should. I had worked tirelessly to build a safe, loving home for him, shielding him from the emotional coldness that had defined my own childhood. I was just transferring a stack of golden brown pancakes onto a warm plate when Leo suddenly gasped. He slid off his stool and ran over to me, holding the tablet up with both hands. His big brown eyes looked up at me, filled with genuine childhood confusion. "Mom," he asked softly, "did Grandpa forget to invite us to eat cake?" I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took the device from him. My stomach dropped as I looked at the screen. It was my father's public social media profile. He had posted a meticulously staged photograph taken at one of the most exclusive and expensive restaurants in the city. There was Harrison sitting at the head of the table, raising a glass of expensive champagne. Next to him sat my mother, Barbara, wearing a designer dress and a smirk. On the other side were my 35-year-old brother Cameron and my 30-year-old sister Ashley. They looked like a wealthy, flawless, and united front. The caption beneath the photo felt like a physical blow. It read, "Celebrating 56 years of life with the people who matter most. All my children have made me proud, except for the single mother who brought shame to this family. This table is for winners only." I stared at the words, feeling a cold numbness spread from my chest down to my fingertips. He had not just excluded me and his only grandson from his birthday dinner. He had used the occasion to publicly humiliate me, to declare to his hundreds of wealthy friends and colleagues that I was a failure. I looked down at Leo, who was still waiting for an answer about the cake. I forced a gentle smile, handed him the tablet, and told him that Grandpa was just having a boring work dinner and that we would go out for our own giant chocolate sundae later. Satisfied, Leo climbed back onto his stool and dug into his pancakes. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door. I did not cry. I had shed my last tear for these people years ago. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed my father's number. I needed to hear him say it. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. Background noise poured through the speaker. The clinking of crystal glasses, polite laughter, and the soft hum of classical music. "Hello," Harrison answered. His voice was loud, slightly slurred, carrying the distinct arrogance of a man who had consumed several glasses of vintage wine. Dad, it is Kelsey, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I just saw your post. He let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed through the phone. What are you calling to beg for a handout, Kelsey? I told you before I am not funding your pathetic lifestyle. I am not asking for money, I replied calmly. I am asking why you felt the need to publicly humiliate your daughter and exclude your grandson. Because you are a disgrace, he snapped, his tone turning vicious. You could not even keep a husband. You let that man walk all over you, and then you came crawling back expecting us to clean up your mess. You dragged our family name through the mud with your divorce. The people at my table tonight are successful. They elevate my status. You are just a burden. A woman who could not do the one simple job of keeping a marriage together. Do not dare show your face and ruin my image. Before I could respond, there was a shuffling sound on the other end of the line. My mother, Barbara, had snatched the phone from him. Her voice came through crisp, sharp, and laced with condescension. Kelsey. Stop ruining your father's special night with your constant whining, she scolded. You made your bed when you failed at your marriage, now lie in it. You are barely scraping by as a lowly office worker. You do not belong at a restaurant like this anyway. You would not even know which fork to use. Just accept your place, stay out of our way, and let your brother and sister enjoy the lives they actually earned. The line went dead. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a steady, monotonous sound that matched the sudden calm settling over my mind. They honestly believed I was a struggling, desperate single mother living paycheck to paycheck. They believed their wealth and status made them untouchable gods, while I was nothing more than dirt beneath their designer shoes. I slowly lowered the phone. I looked out the window at the sweeping skyline of Manhattan. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone against the wall. I simply smiled. It was a cold, calculating smile. The very next morning, my phone rang before I even finished my first cup of coffee. The caller ID flashed with my older brother Cameron. He was the golden child of our family, the one who could do absolutely no wrong in my parents' eyes. I answered the call expecting perhaps a delayed apology or at least a feeble excuse regarding the cruel social media post from the night before. I should have known better. Cameron did not say hello. He did not ask how my son Leo was doing. His voice came through the speaker, dripping with that familiar, suffocating entitlement he had carried since childhood. Kelsey. I need a huge favor, he demanded immediately without taking a breath. I am launching a brand new tech venture, and I am a little short on liquid cash right now. I need $20,000 transferred to my account by tomorrow afternoon. I paused my coffee mug halfway to my lips. $20,000. My brother, whose lavish luxury lifestyle was entirely funded by our father, was actually calling the sister he had publicly discarded to demand cash. I took a slow, deep breath and asked him exactly how he expected me, a supposedly struggling single mother, to hand over $20,000 on a Monday morning. Cameron scoffed loudly. His annoyance was highly palpable through the line. Do not play dumb with me, Kelsey, he snapped. You still have that crappy old sedan, right? It is completely paid off. Just go to the local bank and take out a title loan against it today. You never drive anywhere important anyway. I will pay you back eventually when my company takes off. Just consider it your way of making up for the massive embarrassment you caused this family with your messy public divorce. I let out a short, sharp laugh. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of his request was absolutely staggering. He wanted me to mortgage my only supposed means of transportation, the car I supposedly used to take my young son to elementary school, just to fund another one of his doomed business ideas. Cameron had started and bankrupted 4 different startup companies over the past decade. Every single time my father had bailed him out, wiping away the massive debt and pretending the failure was just a stepping stone to greatness. I am not giving you a single dime, Cameron, I said, my voice dangerously calm and steady. And I am certainly not leveraging my car to fund your wild delusions of grandeur. The heavy silence on the line lasted for several seconds. When Cameron spoke again, his voice had morphed from entitled arrogance to pure vicious venom. You selfish, ungrateful woman, he spat viciously. This is exactly why your husband dumped you while you were pregnant. You only care about yourself. You bring absolutely nothing of value to this family. You are a useless, pathetic burden, and you always have been. Mom and Dad are completely right to cut you out of the big picture. You deserve to be miserable and entirely alone for the rest of your life. I did not raise my voice. I did not hurl emotional insults back at him. I simply pressed the end call button, cutting off his toxic tirade mid-sentence. I placed my smartphone face down on the massive solid oak desk in front of me. I leaned back into my ergonomic Italian leather chair and let my eyes sweep across my surroundings. I was not sitting in a cramped, gloomy office cubicle. I was not struggling to make ends meet or clipping coupons to survive. I was sitting in the sprawling corner office on the 50th floor of a towering Manhattan skyscraper. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered a commanding, breathtaking view of the entire financial district below. For the past 5 years, while my toxic family believed I was barely surviving on pennies, I had been ruthlessly building my massive empire. I was the founder and majority shareholder of Apex Holdings, an elite private equity firm feared and deeply respected across Wall Street. I operated entirely in the shadows, using a highly complex network of legal proxies to keep my identity completely hidden from the public eye. To the business world, the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings was a ghost. To my family, I was a failure. I turned my full attention to the 4 large high-definition monitors arrayed neatly across my desk. The screen on the far left displayed the complete financial portfolio of Harrison Wealth Management, my father's supposedly untouchable prestigious firm. My team of senior analysts had spent the last 3 months quietly digging into his corporate accounts. The truth they uncovered was truly pathetic. My father's firm was bleeding money rapidly. He had made a series of catastrophic investments to maintain his lavish country club lifestyle, and his company was now surviving entirely on a massive commercial line of credit provided by a mid-sized institutional lender named Beacon Financial. Without the constant daily cash flow from Beacon Financial, my father's firm would completely collapse within a matter of days. He would be utterly unable to meet his wealthy client obligations. He would face immediate federal audits. He would lose everything he valued most: his status, his fake wealth, and his precious social standing. I moved my wireless mouse over to the central monitor. On the screen was a highly confidential, legally binding acquisition contract. Apex Holdings had been quietly negotiating a ruthless, hostile takeover of Beacon Financial for several weeks. The board of directors at Beacon had already surrendered to my terms. They were just waiting for my final digital authorization to officially seal the massive deal. Cameron calling me a selfish failure was exactly the confirmation I needed to proceed. My family had shown zero mercy when they threw me and my unborn child to the wolves. They had shown absolutely no remorse when they humiliated me in front of their wealthy elite peers. They felt no guilt whatsoever, demanding I sacrifice my own basic stability to fund their endless vanity. I rested my index finger lightly on the mouse. If I clicked the button, I would instantly become the sole owner of Beacon Financial. I would personally own the heavy debt that kept my father's failing company alive. I would hold the financial leash tightly around his arrogant neck. I looked at the silver-framed photograph of Leo smiling brightly on my desk. They had cruelly excluded him. They had deemed my sweet, innocent boy unworthy of their perfect fake family image. I clicked approve. The bright green confirmation banner flashed boldly across my screen. The transaction was complete. The funds were instantly wired. The legal transfer of supreme power was absolute. I picked up my office phone and dialed the direct extension for my chief legal officer. "The acquisition is officially done," I said, my voice echoing softly in the pristine, silent office. "I want you to initiate an immediate aggressive audit of all outstanding commercial credit lines held by Beacon Financial. Pay very close attention to Harrison Wealth Management. I want their entire debt called in today. Demand full repayment of every single dollar by the end of the week." "Understood," came the crisp, professional reply through the speaker. "Should we offer them a standard restructuring plan to give them time?" "Absolutely not," I replied coldly. "Give them 0 options. Squeeze them until they break." I hung up the phone and stood up, walking slowly over to the glass wall, looking down at the bustling city far below. The gears of my ultimate revenge were officially turning. My father thought he had successfully banished me from his perfect world. He thought he could sit at his expensive Michelin star dinners and mock my existence without ever facing a single consequence. He had no idea that the daughter he discarded like trash had just purchased the very ground he stood on. The fall was going to be devastating, and I was fully prepared to enjoy watching every single second of their complete destruction. The afternoon sun beat down on the Manhattan private elementary school where my son Leo attended first grade. I parked my black sedan a block away, blending into the city traffic. While other parents arrived in chauffeured luxury vehicles, I preferred keeping my massive wealth hidden. I stood near the iron gates, smoothing the lapels of my tailored charcoal suit, waiting for the final bell. A sudden movement pulled me back to reality. A man stepped out from the shadows of an adjacent building blocking my path. I recognized the arrogant smirk instantly. It was Bradley, my 34-year-old ex-husband. The man who callously abandoned me 6 years ago while I was pregnant, choosing a meaningless affair over his family. He wore an outdated designer suit, desperately projecting an image of old money he had long squandered. Beside him was a short, balding man clutching a cheap leather briefcase, clearly a bottom-tier lawyer hired for intimidation. "Well, if it is not the disgraced single mother," Bradley sneered, his voice dripping with toxic condescension. I remembered so vividly. "You look exactly as miserable as your father described." I did not flinch, keeping my posture straight, an expression unreadable. "What do you want, Bradley?" I asked coldly. "You gave up all legal rights to Leo years ago, refusing to pay a cent. You have no business here." "No." Bradley chuckled, adjusting his silk tie. "Things change, Kelsey. Your father called yesterday with generous information. He told me how you are barely scraping by, struggling to raise a growing boy in a pathetic apartment. He said you refuse to help your brother start a business because you are selfish." The lawyer stepped forward. "My client is concerned about his biological son," he stated firmly. "We are preparing to file an emergency petition for full custody. A child needs a stable environment, not a mother with a precarious income and zero family support." The absurdity almost made me laugh. Harrison was truly desperate. Because I refused to hand $20,000 to Cameron, my father tracked down the man who destroyed my marriage. Harrison weaponized my ex-husband, using my child as a bargaining chip to extort me. They believed threatening to take Leo away would force me to beg for mercy and sign over my meager savings. They wanted massive monthly child support payments which Bradley would split with Harrison. "You want custody of a son you have never met?" I asked, staring into his greedy eyes. "You do not know his middle name or his allergies. You are doing this because my father promised a quick payday." Bradley crossed his arms. "I am doing this because you are an unfit mother with a dead-end job. You have zero assets and zero social standing while I come from a respected family. The judge will see your pathetic bank account and hand that boy to me, unless you want to be reasonable settling outside of court. You agree to pay me a hefty monthly settlement, and maybe I will let you see the kid on weekends. Your father thinks that is a fair compromise." I looked at this pathetic man attempting to blackmail a woman he thought was weak. He had absolutely no idea he was standing before a woman who controlled billions in liquid assets. He had no idea I could buy his entire bloodline before dinner time. I raised my hand, signaling the two heavily built school security guards near the entrance. They recognized me immediately, knowing I was the largest anonymous donor to the school foundation. The guards jogged over instantly, their hands resting on their utility belts. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" the taller guard asked, glaring at Bradley and his lawyer. "Yes," I replied sharply. "These two men are harassing me and loitering on school property. The one in the cheap suit has zero legal custody rights to any child here. I want them removed from this block immediately. If they resist, please call the police and press trespassing charges." Bradley flushed bright red with rage. "You cannot just dismiss me, Kelsey," he yelled as the guards stepped between us, forcing him backward. "I will see you in court. I will take everything from you, leaving you with nothing." "You cannot take what you cannot comprehend, Bradley," I stated coldly, turning my back on him. I watched him being shoved down the sidewalk by the guards, his lawyer scurrying behind him. As they disappeared, the school bell rang. Moments later, Leo ran out through the iron gates, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. His bright smile instantly melted the ice in my veins. I knelt down, catching him in a tight hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo. I promised myself right then that I would destroy the men who used my son as a pawn. I walked Leo to the car, buckled him safely into his booster seat, and closed the passenger door. Before getting into the driver's seat, I pulled out my phone and dialed the direct number for my executive assistant. She answered on the first ring. "I need you to contact our litigation department immediately," I ordered. "Tell the managing partner to assemble the most aggressive, ruthless family law strike team in New York City. My ex-husband is attempting to file a custody suit backed by my father. I want them buried in so much aggressive legal paperwork they cannot breathe. I want their financial records subpoenaed, their dirty secrets exposed, and their public reputations completely shredded. Spare absolutely no expense whatsoever. Consider it done," immediately came the crisp and highly efficient reply. I ended the call, slipping my phone into my pocket. Harrison and Bradley thought they had trapped a helpless rabbit. They were about to find out they stepped into the cage of a starving lion. The war had officially started, and I was going to enjoy tearing their pathetic lives apart piece by painful piece. The heavy oak doors of the New York family court closed behind me, sealing us inside the sterile courtroom. The air conditioning hummed a low, monotonous drone that contrasted sharply with the suffocating tension in the room. I sat perfectly still at the respondent table, wearing a pristine, tailored navy suit. Beside me sat Mr. Campbell, the most feared and ruthlessly efficient family law attorney in Manhattan. He cost more per hour than my ex-husband made in a month, and he was worth every single penny. Across the aisle, Bradley sat with his budget lawyer. Bradley had an insufferable smirk plastered across his face, practically vibrating with unearned confidence. He kept adjusting his tie, whispering to his counsel, and casting triumphant glances in my direction. Sitting directly behind him in the public gallery was my father, Harrison. Harrison wore his signature tailored Italian suit, portraying the image of a deeply concerned wealthy patriarch. He offered Bradley encouraging nods, completely ready to throw his own biological daughter straight into the fire, just to secure his own financial leverage. The bailiff announced Judge Ramirez, and we all rose to our feet. The judge was a stern, no-nonsense woman with decades of experience who despised individuals wasting her valuable time. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and signaled for the legal counsel of Bradley to begin their opening statement. The lawyer of Bradley stood up, puffing out his chest. "Your Honor, we are here today to secure an emergency custody transfer for the biological son of my client. We will definitively prove that the current custodial parent, Kelsey, is entirely unfit to provide a stable, safe, or healthy environment for a growing child. My client is a reformed, highly successful businessman with a stable income, ready to offer the boy the life he truly deserves. We will demonstrate that Kelsey suffers from severe financial instability and undocumented mental health issues that put the child at severe risk." I did not react. I simply crossed my legs and kept my gaze fixed on the judge. Mr. Campbell sat casually next to me, taking a slow sip of water. He did not even bother to write down notes. Judge Ramirez frowned slightly. "Those are incredibly severe allegations, counselor. You better have the evidence to back them up. Call your first witness." "I call Harrison to the stand," the lawyer announced. My father stood up, buttoning his suit jacket, and walked to the witness stand with the practiced grace of a seasoned manipulator. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. He looked at the judge with a masterfully crafted expression of deep paternal sorrow. "Please state your relationship to the respondent," the lawyer asked. "I am her father," Harrison replied, letting a heavy theatrical sigh escape his lips. "And it breaks my heart to be sitting here today. But I must protect my innocent grandson. Can you describe the current mental and financial state of your daughter?" the lawyer prompted. Harrison looked directly at me, his eyes cold and dead. "Kelsey has always been highly unstable. When her marriage ended, she suffered a complete mental breakdown. She refused all our attempts to help her get psychiatric treatment. Since then, she has isolated herself and the boy. She lives in squalor, barely scraping by on meager wages from dead-end jobs. She is erratic, deeply depressed, and entirely incapable of providing basic necessities. I have tried to offer her money, but her paranoid delusions make her reject us. Bradley is a good man who made a mistake years ago, but he is stable now. Leo needs a father who can actually afford to feed and clothe him properly. I fear for the safety of my grandson every single day she has him. The sheer level of perjury pouring from his mouth was staggering. He was painting me as a destitute lunatic, all to secure a child support payday from my bank account through Bradley. Bradley sat at his table nodding solemnly, playing the role of the devoted father fighting for his son. Judge Ramirez took notes, her expression growing increasingly grim. She turned to my table. Mr. Campbell, does the respondent have a cross-examination or a defense to present against these severe claims? Mr. Campbell stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. He picked up a sleek black leather folder from our table. Your Honor, we have no desire to cross-examine a man who is clearly committing blatant perjury in your courtroom, Mr. Campbell stated, his voice ringing with absolute authority. We will not waste the time of the court with emotional theatrical performances. We prefer to deal strictly in hard, undeniable facts. Mr. Campbell walked confidently toward the bench of the judge. The petitioner claims my client is destitute, living in squalor, and incapable of providing for her son. Mr. Campbell continued, projecting his voice so every word echoed clearly. He claims the petitioner Bradley is the financially stable parent. I am submitting Exhibit A directly to the bench. He handed a thick stack of documents to the bailiff, who passed them to Judge Ramirez. Exhibit A contains the certified federal income tax returns of my client for the past 5 years, Mr. Campbell explained. As you will see, Your Honor, the personal reported income of my client last year alone exceeded $45 million. The smirk of Bradley vanished instantly. Harrison gripped the railing of the witness stand, his knuckles turning completely white. The entire courtroom fell deadly silent. Judge Ramirez flipped through the tax documents, her eyes widening slightly behind her glasses. She looked up at me, then back down at the papers, verifying the official government seals. Furthermore, Mr. Campbell continued, pulling 3 more documents from his folder and sliding them onto the bench. I submit Exhibit B. These are the official property deeds to 3 luxury high-rise apartment buildings located in the Tribeca district of Manhattan. These buildings are owned free and clear with 0 mortgages and 0 debt by an LLC, of which my client is the sole anonymous proprietor. The combined market value of these real estate assets is approximately $120 million. My client resides in a custom-built penthouse suite at the top of one of these fully secured buildings. The jaw of Bradley practically hit the floor. He stared at me as if I had just grown a second head. The face of Harrison lost all its color, transforming into an absolute mask of shock and horror. He physically staggered in the witness box, grasping for breath. The destitute daughter he just described under oath was sitting on a massive real estate empire. Finally, Mr. Campbell added, turning to look directly at Bradley. We have also submitted Exhibit C. This is the recent bank statement and credit report of the petitioner. Bradley currently has negative $200 in his checking account, $40,000 in credit card debt, and is 2 months behind on rent for a studio apartment in Queens. He is also currently unemployed. Judge Ramirez slammed the documents down on her desk. The sound cracked like a whip. Her face was flushed with absolute fury as she glared at Bradley and his lawyer. Is this some kind of sick joke? Judge Ramirez demanded, her voice shaking the room. You bring an emergency custody petition to my courtroom claiming this child is in danger of poverty and starvation. You put a witness on the stand to testify under oath that the mother is destitute. Meanwhile, the mother owns half of Tribeca, and the father cannot even afford his own rent. The lawyer of Bradley stammered desperately, looking at the documents. Your Honor, we had no prior knowledge, we were told by the grandfather. Judge Ramirez cut him off sharply. I have heard enough. This petition is entirely frivolous, baseless, and an insult to the judicial system. Case dismissed with prejudice. You are explicitly barred from filing any future custody petitions without presenting verified financial documentation first. She turned her furious gaze toward Harrison, who was still frozen in the witness box. And you, sir, are incredibly lucky I am not holding you in contempt of court for perjury right this second. Get out of my courtroom before I change my mind and have the bailiff place you in handcuffs." Judge Ramirez slammed her gavel down and stormed out of the room. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. I did not gloat. I did not celebrate. I simply picked up my handbag. Bradley sat paralyzed at his table, completely humiliated and legally crushed. His quick payday had just evaporated into thin air. Harrison stumbled down from the witness stand, his chest heaving. He marched toward me, his face contorted with a mixture of intense embarrassment and furious denial. He could not accept that he had been so thoroughly outplayed and outclassed by the daughter he discarded. "This is a trick," Harrison hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me as we walked into the courthouse hallway. "There is absolutely no way you made that kind of money honestly. You must be sleeping with some ancient billionaire. You are just a high-priced gold digger trading favors for property deeds. You are still nothing but a massive disappointment to this family." I stopped walking. I turned slowly to face him, looking down at his pathetic, desperate attempt to salvage his shattered ego. I stepped close enough to see the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "I do not sleep with billionaires, Dad," I whispered coldly, ensuring every word pierced his pride. "I destroy them. And you are next." The drive from the courthouse back to the corporate headquarters of Harrison Wealth Management was absolutely suffocating. Harrison sat in the back of his chauffeured town car, his breathing shallow and rapid. The humiliating image of the tax documents belonging to his discarded daughter haunted his mind. He walked into his opulent lobby, expecting the usual fawning greetings from his receptionists. Instead, he found absolute pandemonium unfolding before his eyes. Strangers in sharp gray suits were systematically packing confidential client portfolios into secure lockboxes. Men and women with stern faces were downloading terabytes of financial data directly from the private servers of the firm. His chief financial officer stood pale and trembling near the glass elevators, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What is the exact meaning of this?" Harrison demanded, his voice cracking with undisguised panic. The chief financial officer swallowed hard, looking around nervously. "An emergency audit. Harrison, the Federal Regulatory Board received an anonymous tip this morning containing highly specific allegations of major financial discrepancies. They froze our outbound wire transfers an hour ago. We are completely locked out of the system." Harrison pushed past his terrified employees and bolted into his corner office, slamming the heavy mahogany door shut behind him. His hands shook violently as he logged into his secure offline terminal. He bypassed the standard client viewing portals and accessed the deep internal ledgers. The screen illuminated the brutal, undeniable truth he had spent the last 8 months trying to ignore. There was a catastrophic $5 million deficit in the primary client escrow accounts. It was a gaping, bleeding wound in his balance sheet. He had not lost the money in a volatile stock market crash. He had not made a bad real estate investment. He had actively and blatantly stolen it. He had siphoned the funds directly from the retirement accounts of his wealthiest, most trusting clients to maintain the absurd illusion of his flawless family. The heavy office door suddenly swung open. Barbara marched in wearing a furious expression and clutching a designer handbag that cost more than most people made in an entire year. "Harrison, you need to call the credit card company right this second," Barbara snapped, throwing her expensive purse onto his polished desk. "I was just at the luxury boutique buying a custom dress for the upcoming country club gala, and my premium card was declined," declined Harrison. The cashier looked at me like I was a common beggar. "Fix this embarrassing mistake before the rumors start spreading among our friends." Harrison stared at his wife, his vision blurring with sheer rage. He grabbed his crystal paperweight and hurled it against the far wall, where it shattered into 100 jagged pieces. Barbara shrieked, taking a sudden step back, her arrogant demeanor faltering. "There is no money left to fix it," Harrison roared, his carefully crafted patrician voice deteriorating into a desperate snarl. "The cards are completely maxed out. The firm is completely frozen by federal auditors. We are $5 million in the hole, Barbara." Barbara stared at him, her perfectly manicured hands trembling. $5 million. How is that even mathematically possible? You manage hundreds of millions for the most elite families in this city. I managed them until I had to start robbing Peter to pay Paul. Harrison shouted, pointing an accusing finger at her chest. Where do you think the money came from when Cameron demanded that imported Italian sports car to keep up appearances with his rich friends? I pulled it straight from a client portfolio. Where do you think the cash came from when Ashley racked up $500,000 in luxury vacation debt and designer clothes she wore exactly once? I forged the transfer documents to cover her tracks. I funded this pathetic fake royalty lifestyle because you refused to ever tell your precious perfect children no. Barbara flushed bright red, her defensive instincts flaring instantly. Do not you dare blame my children for your complete incompetence, Harrison. You are supposed to be the financial genius. You are the one who insisted we maintain our elite social standing at all costs. You stood in our kitchen and promised me the money would always be there to support Cameron and Ashley. The ringing of the private secure line on the desk interrupted their bitter screaming match. Harrison snatched the receiver, taking a deep breath to compose himself. It was his primary contact at the Central Commercial Bank, the final financial lifeline he had been begging for all week long. Listen to me, we need that bridge loan approved today. Harrison pleaded, his tone instantly shifting to desperate negotiation. Just a temporary liquidity injection to balance the books before the auditors dig too deep and misunderstand our accounting methods. The voice on the other end of the line was brutally cold and entirely unsympathetic. I am sorry, Harrison. The loan committee officially denied your application 10 minutes ago. Your risk profile was severely flagged by our parent company. We are actually calling in your existing debts effective immediately. You have until Friday to clear your balances. Good luck. The line went completely dead. Harrison slowly lowered the phone, the remaining color draining completely from his face. The bank had abandoned them. The auditors were literally standing outside his door, packing up his life into cardboard boxes. Federal prison was no longer a distant nightmare, it was a rapidly approaching reality. We are going to lose absolutely everything, Barbara whispered, her voice dropping an octave as the gravity of the situation finally pierced her delusion. The massive house, the luxury cars, the exclusive club memberships. They will put you in handcuffs and parade you on the evening news. What are we going to do to survive this? Harrison collapsed into his leather chair, burying his face in his shaking hands. His mind raced frantically, searching for any possible asset he could liquidate to cover the stolen $5 million. His personal properties were already leveraged to the maximum legal limit. His private stocks were gone. The land, Barbara said, suddenly, her eyes widening with a sudden, desperate realization. The massive suburban estate your mother left behind. It is 50 acres of prime development property located in the most sought-after district. We can sell it right now. Harrison looked up, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. I cannot sell that land, Barbara. My mother specifically put it in a hidden legal trust before she died. She bypassed us completely. She left the entire estate directly to Kelsey. Barbara gasped, stepping closer to the desk and gripping the edge tightly. You never told me that. You said the property was tied up in probate court disputes. I buried the paperwork, Harrison confessed, his voice a harsh, raspy whisper. I paid a shady attorney to bury the legal transfer documents because I refused to let that ungrateful divorced failure inherit a multi-million-dollar property while my chosen children got absolutely nothing. Kelsey has absolutely no idea the land legally belongs to her. She thinks the state took it for unpaid taxes years ago. Barbara leaned over the desk, her eyes gleaming with dark, malicious intent. Then she never has to know, Harrison. The property is still technically sitting in legal limbo according to the public records. We still have the original physical deed secured in the family safe at home. We can forge the executor's signatures today. I know a predatory commercial developer who buys land for cash with absolutely no questions asked. We can liquidate the entire estate by the weekend, pocket the $5 million, and replace the stolen client funds before the federal auditors figure it out. Harrison stared at his wife, realizing the massive criminal line they were about to cross. Forging estate documents to steal an inheritance from his own biological daughter was a severe felony that carried decades in prison. But the alternative was wearing an orange jumpsuit and losing his golden reputation forever. He thought about the smug, arrogant look on the face of Kelsey in the courtroom. He thought about how she had humiliated him in front of the judge and refused to help her brother. Call the commercial developer. Harrison ordered, his voice completely devoid of any remaining morality or hesitation. Tell him we are ready to sell the land today at a massive discount for an immediate, untraceable cash transfer. We will handle the legal paperwork ourselves. Kelsey will never see a single dime of that money, and we will save this family. The sun dipped below the Manhattan skyline when the private elevator chimed softly in my penthouse. I was sitting at the marble kitchen island, helping Leo with his spelling homework. We were having a peaceful, quiet evening, completely detached from the pathetic chaos unfolding across the city. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. My head of security informed me that my younger sister Ashley was standing in the lobby demanding immediate access. She had somehow tracked down my address, likely paying a private investigator with her last credit crumbs. I told the guards to send her up. I wanted to see exactly what kind of desperate game my family was trying to play next. The elevator doors slid open, revealing Ashley in all her manufactured glory. She wore an absurdly expensive designer trench coat, holding a luxury handbag that cost more than a reliable car. She stepped into my foyer, and her eyes darted around the massive, open-concept living space. I could see the sharp flash of pure jealousy burning in her gaze as she took in the panoramic views of the city and the original artwork hanging on the walls. But true to her toxic nature, she immediately masked her intense envy with an ugly sneer. She refused to acknowledge Leo, who simply picked up his crayons and walked to his playroom, sensing the negative energy she dragged into our home. Ashley marched straight to the kitchen island, her high heels clicking loudly against the polished floor. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was doing. She unclasped her bag and aggressively slammed a thick stack of legal documents onto the pristine marble surface. A sleek silver pen rolled out, stopping right in front of my hands. "Sign it," Ashley ordered, her voice dripping with that unbearable, arrogant tone she always used when speaking to me. "Do not bother reading it because you would not understand the legal jargon anyway. Mom and Dad are currently restructuring some family assets, and they need immediate capital to turn a profit on a new investment. They need to liquidate a useless plot of land in the suburbs, and your signature is required to clear some outdated bureaucratic red tape. Just sign the bottom line so I can leave this depressing place. You absolutely have no right to hold up the financial progress of this family." I did not touch the silver pen. Instead, I picked up the heavy stack of papers and scanned the first page. My eyes locked onto the legal header. It was a formal renunciation of inheritance rights. The property listed was a 50-acre estate located in the most exclusive zip code of the state. It was the exact estate my grandmother had lived on before she passed away. I read the fine print carefully, my mind processing the massive criminal conspiracy my family had orchestrated. The documents explicitly stated that the undersigned Kelsey permanently surrendered all legal claims to the estate, transferring full undisputed ownership directly to Harrison. The absolute brilliance of their greed hit me like a shockwave. My grandmother had not left the estate to my father. She had left it entirely to me. Harrison had intentionally buried her final will, keeping the multi-million-dollar property a complete secret for years. He had hidden my rightful inheritance because he could not stomach the idea of his discarded daughter owning an asset far more valuable than his own home. Now that his fraudulent company was completely collapsing and the federal auditors were breathing down his neck, he was desperately trying to steal my land to cover his stolen client funds. He sent his brainless, pampered daughter to do his dirty work, hoping I was stupid enough to sign away millions of dollars without asking a single question. I looked up from the fraudulent document, staring dead into the impatient eyes of Ashley. "You are truly the most pathetic pawn Harrison has ever played," I stated, my voice eerily calm and devoid of all emotion. "You waltz into my home demanding I sign over an estate that legally belongs to me, just so our father can save his own skin from federal prison. He stole $5 million from his client Ashley. He is completely bankrupt. And he sent you here to help him commit felony real estate fraud. Ashley turned ghost white, her arrogant posture instantly crumbling. She opened her mouth to argue, but the sheer panic in her eyes betrayed her. She had absolutely no idea what she was carrying. She was just a spoiled, obedient puppet following orders to maintain her luxury lifestyle. "Take your ridiculous handbag and get out of my home immediately," I commanded, stepping around the island and backing her toward the elevator. "If you ever come near my son or my property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing and harassment." "You are making a huge mistake," Ashley stammered, her voice shaking as she retreated into the elevator car. "Dad is going to destroy you for this." I hit the lobby button, watching the doors slide shut on her terrified face. "He is more than welcome to try," I replied as the metal doors sealed her away. I walked back to the kitchen island and picked up the fraudulent documents. My blood ran ice cold with pure, calculated fury. Harrison had crossed the ultimate line. He had not just insulted me or discarded me, he had actively tried to rob me of the one final gift my grandmother had left behind. I walked into the playroom and gently kissed the forehead of Leo, telling his nanny I had some urgent business to attend to. I grabbed my keys and my winter coat. I refused to let my lawyers handle this pathetic extortion. I was going to drive straight to the heavily mortgaged mansion of Harrison and deal with his arrogant criminal behavior face to face. The time for hiding in the shadows was officially over. The drive to the sprawling suburban estate of my parents took less than an hour, but every single mile fueled the icy rage pumping through my veins. The imposing iron gates of the property stood wide open, a glaring symbol of their sheer arrogance. I parked my car directly in the center of the circular driveway, right behind the leased luxury vehicles my father could no longer actually afford. The massive brick mansion loomed in the darkness, projecting a pathetic illusion of generational wealth that was currently crumbling under the weight of severe federal audits and massive financial fraud. I gripped the thick stack of fraudulent legal documents tightly in my right hand. I did not bother knocking on the heavy mahogany front door. I simply turned the brass handle and stepped inside the house I had once called home. The grand foyer was dead silent, but I could hear the tense, hushed voices of my parents echoing from the formal dining room. I walked down the marble hallway, my heels striking the floor with deliberate, measured precision. When I stepped into the dining room, Harrison and Barbara both froze. They were sitting at the long mahogany table, clutching crystal glasses filled with expensive scotch. They clearly expected their obedient puppet Ashley to walk through those doors carrying my forged signature on a silver platter. Instead, they found the daughter they had ruthlessly discarded standing before them, holding the absolute proof of their desperate criminal conspiracy. "What are you doing here?" Harrison demanded, his voice thick with a mixture of sudden panic and lingering alcohol. "Where is your sister?" I tossed the legal paperwork onto the dining table. The document slid across the polished wood, stopping right next to his crystal glass. "I brought your pathetic attempt at real estate fraud back to you," I stated, my voice echoing coldly off the high vaulted ceilings. "You honestly thought you could send Ashley to my home and trick me into signing away a 50-acre estate that legally belongs to me. You thought I was stupid enough to surrender my rightful inheritance from grandmother just so you could liquidate the land and cover the $5 million you stole from your own clients." Barbara gasped, dropping her glass onto the table. The amber liquid spilled across the expensive linen runner, but she did not even notice. Her face turned an unnatural shade of chalk white. "How did you know about the client funds?" Barbara whispered, her voice trembling with raw, unfiltered fear. "I know absolutely everything," I replied, keeping my posture perfectly straight and dominant. "I know the Federal Regulatory Board froze your outbound wire transfers. I know the Central Commercial Bank denied your emergency bridge loan and called in your existing debts. I know you are staring down the barrel of a massive federal indictment. And you are terrified of trading your custom-tailored suits for a bright orange prison uniform." Harrison sprang to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. His face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The veins in his neck bulged as he slammed his fist down on the table. "You listen to me, you ungrateful, wretched woman," he roared, the last shred of his refined patrician facade completely vanishing. "I gave you life. I put a roof over your head and food on your plate for 2 entire decades. You owe this family everything. You will pick up that pen right now, and you will sign those legal documents transferring the property deed back to me. You owe us your absolute loyalty, Kelsey. Barbara shrieked, joining the vicious verbal assault. We are facing complete financial ruin. We are about to lose this house, the cars, and our entire social standing in this community. You are deliberately destroying your own family over a piece of undeveloped dirt. You have always been a selfish, arrogant burden. You ruined your marriage and now you are trying to ruin us. Sign the papers and save your father. I looked at the two people who were supposed to protect and nurture me. I thought about the years I spent desperately seeking your basic parental approval. I thought about the endless nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why I was never good enough for this family. All of those painful memories evaporated the second you tried to use my son as a pawn in your sick financial games. You crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. I did not flinch. I did not shed a single tear. I simply stared at them with absolute profound disgust. I owe you absolutely nothing, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet whisper that forced them to listen. Grandmother left that estate to me because she knew exactly what kind of greedy, manipulative thief you truly are, Harrison. She knew you would burn through every single dollar to feed your pathetic, fragile ego. I am not signing away my inheritance to save a criminal. You made your bed, and now you are going to lie in it while the federal government locks the cell door. The sheer finality of my words pushed Harrison over the edge of sanity. He let out a primal, furious scream and lunged across the dining room table. He raised his heavy right hand, aiming a vicious, open-palmed slap directly at my face. He wanted to physically strike me down, to beat me back into the submissive, terrified daughter I used to be. But I was no longer that frightened girl. I anticipated his pathetic, violent outburst long before his hand even cut through the air. I swiftly stepped to the side, letting his heavy hand slice harmlessly through empty space. The sheer momentum of his missed strike caused him to lose his balance completely. He stumbled awkwardly forward, crashing heavily against the edge of the dining table and knocking his empty Scotch glass to the floor where it shattered into a dozen pieces. Barbara let out a high-pitched scream, covering her mouth in shock. Harrison groaned, gripping the edge of the table as he struggled to regain his footing, his chest heaving with exhaustion and impotent rage. I calmly reached down and picked up the fraudulent legal documents from the table. I looked Harrison dead in the eyes, making sure he saw the absolute void of mercy in my gaze. I gripped the thick stack of papers with both hands and ripped them straight down the middle. I tore them again and again, until the legal threat was reduced to nothing more than worthless, jagged scraps of confetti. I threw the shredded pieces directly into his sweating, humiliated face. The paper rained down over his expensive suit and landed softly among the shards of broken glass on the floor. You want to sell that land to save your failing company? I asked, my voice slicing through the tense, silent room like a razor-sharp blade. I leaned in slightly, delivering the final devastating blow. Good luck with that, Harrison, because the person currently buying up your massive corporate debt will not give you the chance to sell anything at all. I did not wait for him to process the chilling warning. I did not wait for Barbara to start her inevitable hysterical sobbing. I turned my back on them and walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. I pulled the heavy front door open and stepped out into the crisp, cool night air, leaving the shattered remnants of my toxic family locked inside their own impending doom. They had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. The countdown to their total destruction had officially accelerated, and I was holding the only stopwatch. The morning sunlight pierced through the expansive glass windows of Harrison Wealth Management, offering a stark contrast to the suffocating gloom inside the executive suite. It was Monday, exactly 3 days after our explosive confrontation at the family estate. Harrison sat behind his massive mahogany desk, staring blankly at the chaotic piles of financial records left behind by the relentless federal auditors. His meticulously styled hair was disheveled, his silk tie hung loosely around his collar, and the empty crystal Scotch glass from Friday night still sat near his keyboard. The illusion of his invincible corporate empire was fracturing rapidly, but the absolute final blow had not yet been delivered. At precisely 9 in the morning, the heavy oak door of his office swung open without a warning knock. His terrified receptionist stood trembling in the doorway, clutching a thick sealed envelope bearing the distinct gold-embossed crest of a premium legal courier service. The courier required a direct biometric signature from the chief executive officer. She stammered, setting the package down on the edge of his desk before quickly retreating into the safety of the busy hallway. Harrison stared at the heavy envelope, his hands visibly shaking as he reached for a silver letter opener. He sliced through the thick paper and pulled out a stack of pristine legal documents. The header on the very first page commanded his immediate attention, printed in bold black ink. It was a formal notification of debt acquisition and immediate collection from Apex Holdings. His blood ran completely ice cold as his eyes darted across the ruthless legal terminology. The document detailed the exact financial maneuvering that had taken place over the weekend. Apex Holdings, a shadowy and terrifyingly powerful private equity firm, had systematically bought out every single line of commercial credit, every leveraged loan, and every outstanding debt tied to Harrison Wealth Management. They had acquired his entire $15 million deficit, paying in pure liquid cash to his former banking partners. Apex Holdings was now his sole, undisputed creditor. Harrison flipped frantically to the second page, his breath catching painfully in his throat. The terms of the aggressive debt acquisition were completely non-negotiable. Apex Holdings demanded 100% repayment of the $15 million balance within exactly 7 calendar days. There were no restructuring options offered. There were no grace periods available. The final paragraph of the legal notification delivered the ultimate lethal strike. If the total balance was not transferred to the specified offshore holding accounts by the strict deadline, Apex Holdings would execute an immediate total asset freeze. They would seize the corporate headquarters, they would confiscate his personal suburban estate, and they would officially submit their comprehensive dossier of his fraudulent client ledger activities directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The document explicitly promised criminal prosecution for severe wire fraud and corporate embezzlement. A primal sound of pure terror escaped the throat of Harrison. The devastating reality of the trap crashed down upon him. He was completely cornered. The invisible chief executive officer of Apex Holdings had expertly engineered an inescapable financial execution. Desperation hijacked his nervous system. Harrison slammed his fist onto the intercom button, ordering his receptionist to hold all internal meetings. He grabbed his personal smartphone, scrolling frantically through his elite contacts list. He had spent 3 entire decades cultivating relationships with the wealthiest, most influential players on Wall Street. He had golfed with commercial banking titans, dined with billionaire investors, and hosted lavish charity galas for powerful venture capitalists. Surely one of his loyal, affluent peers would offer him a temporary financial lifeline to weather this sudden catastrophic storm. He dialed the private number of his oldest business associate, a managing partner at a prestigious global investment bank. The line rang twice before clicking over to a cold, impersonal assistant who informed him the partner was indefinitely unavailable. Harrison gritted his teeth and dialed the chief financial officer of a massive hedge fund he had personally helped launch a decade ago. The call went straight to a generic automated voicemail. Panic escalating into full-blown hysteria, Harrison began calling every single favor he had ever earned. He dialed former college fraternity brothers who now ran massive syndicates. He called wealthy politicians he had heavily backed during local election cycles. He phoned the arrogant country club board members who had gladly drank his expensive wine just last month. Every single call ended in rapid, brutal rejection. Some simply ignored his incoming number, leaving him to listen to endless ringing. Others answered only to abruptly cut him off the second he mentioned needing emergency capital. A few of his closest associates were brutally honest, their voices dripping with toxic self-preservation. "I cannot help you, Harrison," one prominent venture capitalist stated coldly before hanging up. A massive red flag went up across the entire financial district this morning. Word came down from the absolute top of the food chain that your firm is completely radioactive. Whoever is running Apex Holdings has quietly blacklisted you across every major trading floor and lending institution in this city. Anyone who throws you a financial rope will instantly become a direct target of their aggressive litigation team. You are a walking corpse, Harrison. Do not call this number ever again. The phone slipped from his sweaty palm, dropping heavily onto the hardwood floor. The chilling truth echoed loudly in the silent office. The ruthless leader of Apex Holdings had not just bought his massive debt, they had systematically dismantled his entire professional network. They had issued a terrifying hidden directive across Wall Street, warning the entire financial elite that helping Harrison Wealth Management was professional suicide. He was completely isolated, abandoned by the same arrogant high society he had sacrificed his own daughter to impress. Harrison sank slowly to his knees, grasping his chest, as a sudden wave of crushing anxiety washed over him. The walls of his luxurious corner office were violently closing in. He had exactly 7 days to produce $15 million he did not possess, or he would spend the rest of his miserable life rotting inside a federal prison cell. He looked wildly around the empty room, realizing that his fake empire was already dead. The terrifying countdown had officially begun and nobody was coming to save him. Miles away, a completely different kind of execution was taking place. Cameron sat in the glass-walled office of his fake tech startup. He spent his morning admiring his reflection, completely oblivious to the financial slaughter heading his way. His company produced absolutely nothing. It was merely a glamorous facade designed to funnel the stolen wealth of his father into his extravagant playboy lifestyle. He leased sports cars and treated his employees like personal assistants. Suddenly, the glass doors burst open. His operations manager rushed in, clutching a tablet. Every single one of our primary suppliers just terminated their contracts, effective immediately, the manager shouted in panic. They froze our accounts and halted all inbound shipments. Cameron stood up, adjusting his designer suit jacket. That is physically impossible, he sneered. Tell accounting to wire them the standard retainer from the primary corporate account. The manager shook his head violently. The accounts are completely locked, Cameron. Our bank flagged us for severe risk this morning. The supplier said a private equity firm called Apex Holdings just acquired the parent companies of our entire supply chain. Apex issued a direct legal mandate to blacklist us. We are shut down with zero cash flow today. The arrogant smirk melted off the face of Cameron. The name Apex Holdings meant nothing to him, but a frozen bank account sparked primal fear. To maintain his fake billionaire persona, Cameron had quietly borrowed an exorbitant amount of money from deeply dangerous people. He had taken a massive cash loan from a violent underground syndicate operating out of the Diamond District. As if summoned by his rising terror, his private cell phone began vibrating violently. The caller identification displayed a restricted number. Cameron answered with a shaky hand. The voice on the other end was quiet and absolutely lethal. Your bank account's just flatlined, Cameron, the voice stated calmly. We gave you $2 million. We just got word that your entire operation is a sinking ship. We are calling the loan in right now. You have 24 hours to deliver our cash, or my associates are going to visit your office and collect our payment in blood and bone. The line clicked dead. Cameron dropped his phone, his knees buckling beneath him. If he did not produce $2 million by tomorrow, they would literally end his life. Blind terror consumed him entirely. He shoved past his panicked employees, bolted out of the building, and sprinted toward his sports car. He needed his father to write another massive check to save him. Cameron drove like a complete maniac, swerving recklessly through the afternoon traffic until he finally reached the towering iron gates of the family estate. He skidded to a halt in the circular driveway, leaving his car running and the door wide open. He sprinted up the marble steps and practically tore the heavy front door off its hinges. "Dad," he screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice cracking with pure pathetic desperation. "Dad, you have to help me right now." Harrison was standing in the center of the grand living room, a half-empty bottle of scotch clutched in his trembling hand. He had just returned from his own disastrous day at the wealth management firm, having fled his office to avoid facing the federal auditors. Barbara was pacing nervously near the fireplace, wearing her silk bathrobe and wringing her manicured hands. Cameron collapsed onto the expensive Persian rug, sobbing uncontrollably like a frightened child. He grabbed the pant leg of his father, burying his tear-stained face into the expensive fabric. "You have to wire me $2 million today, Dad," he wailed, his entire body shaking violently. "My company is completely shut down. The suppliers cut me off because of some firm called Apex Holdings. I owe money to incredibly dangerous people, Dad. They are going to find me and hurt me if I do not pay them by tomorrow. You have to save me." The mention of Apex Holdings struck Harrison like a physical blow to the chest. The very same invisible entity that was currently threatening him with federal prison had systematically targeted his son on the exact same day. It was a coordinated, highly calculated execution of his entire family bloodline. Instead of leaning down to comfort his weeping son, Harrison violently kicked his leg free. He stared down at the pathetic, sobbing mess of a man he had proudly paraded as the golden child for 3 decades. "I have absolutely nothing left to give you," Harrison roared, his voice echoing viciously off the high vaulted ceilings. "The firm is completely bankrupt, Cameron. Apex Holdings bought my entire $15 million commercial debt this morning. They are going to seize this mansion and throw me in a federal cell by the end of the week. I gave you millions of dollars over the years to build a legitimate business, and you squandered every single penny playing dress-up. You are a useless, incompetent failure." Barbara shrieked, rushing forward and dropping to her knees to wrap her arms around her weeping son. "Do not you dare speak to our boy like that, Harrison!" she screamed, her eyes flashing with venomous hatred toward her husband. "He is just a victim of this terrible economy. You are supposed to be the great financial protector of this family. You promised me you would always take care of him. If these dangerous people hurt my son, I will personally testify against you in federal court. I will tell the judges everything about your stolen client funds." Harrison hurled his scotch bottle directly into the stone fireplace, where it shattered loudly, sending glass and alcohol spraying across the hearth. "Go ahead and testify, you ungrateful, wretched woman," he bellowed, his face turning bright purple with fury. "I committed those financial crimes to fund the pathetic vanity of you and your spoiled children. I stole to buy his sports cars and your country club dresses. You drained me dry, and now we are all going to burn together." The grand living room dissolved into a war zone of shrieking accusations and bitter tears. The flawless family image they had worshipped for decades was officially dead. The golden child was weeping on the floor, hiding from mobsters. The proud matriarch was threatening to send her husband to prison. The wealthy patriarch was a broken, defeated criminal. The invincible fortress of the Harrison family was tearing itself apart from the inside out, exactly as Kelsey had planned from the very beginning of her revenge strategy. Across town, Ashley stood on a velvet pedestal inside an exclusive bridal boutique on Fifth Avenue. She sipped vintage champagne. She admired the custom silk gown adorned with hand-sewn pearls. The dress cost $85,000. Ashley smiled arrogantly at the tired sales associate making microscopic adjustments. She was marrying into a powerful real estate dynasty. Her fiancé Preston was heir to a billionaire empire. She spent months rubbing her high society engagement in everyone's faces, ensuring Kelsey received an invitation to rub salt in her wounds. Her handbag vibrated nearby. Ashley ordered the associate to fetch it immediately. She snatched the phone, expecting a text from Preston. Instead, the caller identification displayed her future mother-in-law, a rigid matriarch who controlled the family fortune tightly. Ashley cleared her throat, plastering a sickly sweet smile across her face. She answered the call with an overly enthusiastic greeting, expecting to discuss floral arrangements for the country club reception. "Ashley, we are canceling the wedding. Effective immediately," the matriarch stated. "Preston blocked your number and instructed our security to deny you entry. You are never to contact my son or anyone in this family ever again." Ashley let out a breathless, nervous laugh, thinking this was some bizarre high society test. She clutched the heavy phone tighter. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly feeling heavy. "The invitations went out yesterday. We are getting married in exactly 3 weeks. You cannot just cancel everything like this." "Watch me," the older woman replied ruthlessly. "Our wealth management office received an interesting briefing from our Wall Street network this morning. We were informed your father faces a catastrophic federal audit for financial fraud. We were notified a firm called Apex Holdings acquired his commercial debt and is preparing to seize his assets. Your father is a common thief who stole millions from his own clients. He is completely bankrupt and staring down a massive federal indictment. Our prestigious family relies on an absolutely spotless public reputation, the matriarch continued, her harsh voice dripping with pure disgust. We will not allow our pristine legacy to be contaminated by a bankrupt criminal family. You are officially a massive social liability, Ashley. Consider this high society engagement permanently terminated. The phone line clicked dead. Ashley stood frozen, the phone slipping from her trembling fingers and shattering against the hardwood floor. The perfect illusion of her billionaire future shattered into a million irreparable pieces. A full-blown panic attack seized her chest. She let out a piercing guttural scream and collapsed completely, dropping to her knees right on the edge of the velvet pedestal. The $85,000 silk gown ripped loudly at the seams as she fell, her makeup smearing violently across the pristine white fabric. The boutique manager ordered her to leave immediately, threatening to call the police if she did not take off the ruined dress. Ashley was unceremoniously shoved out of the luxury store, her face streaked with black mascara, her dream completely annihilated. She hailed a cab, weeping uncontrollably the entire ride back to the suburban estate. She burst through the heavy mahogany front doors of the mansion, expecting to find her father. Instead, she walked straight into a literal war zone. A crystal Scotch bottle was shattered across the fireplace hearth. Cameron was sobbing hysterically on the expensive Persian rug, while Barbara shrieked at Harrison, who looked like a broken, defeated old man. "They canceled the wedding!" Ashley screamed, echoing violently off the high vaulted ceilings. The family of Preston called and canceled the entire wedding. They know absolutely everything, Dad. Their financial advisors told them, you are a bankrupt criminal. They know some company called Apex Holdings is about to seize this house. You ruined my life. You destroyed my only chance at being a billionaire wife. Cameron scrambled up from the floor, his face red and puffy from crying. "Shut up about your stupid wedding." "Ashley," Cameron yelled, spitting his words with toxic venom. "I have underground mobsters hunting me down right now because my suppliers completely cut me off. They are going to kill me by tomorrow if Dad does not wire me $2 million. Your pathetic romance means absolutely nothing compared to my actual life being in danger." Ashley whipped around, her grief instantly morphing into blinding, violent fury. She lunged at her older brother, shoving him hard in the chest. "You are a useless, pathetic loser, Cameron," she shrieked wildly. "You squandered millions of dollars playing pretend businessman. If you had not drained the accounts of Dad, maybe he would not have stolen from his clients. This is entirely your fault. You dragged this entire family down with your endless stupidity." Cameron shoved her back forcefully, knocking her into an expensive antique side table. "You spoiled, ungrateful brat," he roared, stepping forward aggressively. "You spent $500,000 on luxury vacations and designer clothes you wore exactly once. You bled this family dry just as much as I did. You are nothing without the money of Dad. You are a useless plastic doll, and Preston only wanted you for the business connections you no longer have." Ashley let out a feral scream and launched herself at him, entirely losing her mind. She slapped his face, her sharp nails scratching deeply across his cheek. Cameron grabbed her wrist, shoving her backward. They crashed into the leather sofa, tearing at each other like rabid animals trapped in a burning cage. They screamed vicious insults, ripping apart every single insecurity and failure they had hidden behind their fake smiles for decades. Barbara dropped to her knees, weeping loudly and begging them to stop fighting. Harrison simply watched them destroy each other, his expression completely hollow. The flawless, perfect family they had brutally tormented Kelsey to protect was dead. They were just a pack of desperate, cornered thieves turning on each other in the final seconds before their total annihilation. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Tribeca penthouse, holding a crystal glass of sparkling water. The city below moved in a mesmerizing rhythm of yellow taxicabs and hurrying pedestrians, completely unaware of the financial slaughter I had orchestrated. Leo was safely tucked into his custom race car bed, fast asleep after a long day of school and reading his favorite dinosaur books. The silence in my home was absolute peace. It was the exact opposite of the horrific screaming match I knew was currently tearing the suburban mansion apart. My smartphone buzzed against the marble kitchen island, vibrating with a harsh mechanical urgency that shattered the quiet atmosphere. I walked over and glanced at the glowing screen. The caller identification displayed the name Harrison. He was calling me. The invincible patriarch was finally reaching out to the daughter he had brutally cast aside. I did not answer immediately. I took a slow, deliberate breath and opened the secure recording application on my phone. I tapped the red circle, watching the timer begin to count the seconds. Only then did I press the green accept button and raise the device to my ear. I did not say hello. I simply waited, letting the heavy silence stretch across the cellular connection. Kelsey, he began, his voice sounding completely unrecognizable. It was no longer the booming, arrogant roar of a wealthy corporate titan. It was a pathetic, raspy wheeze of a terrified old man suffocating under the weight of his own massive failures. Kelsey, please do not hang up the phone. I am begging you to just listen to me for one single minute. You have to help your family. We are entirely out of options. I leaned against the cool marble counter, keeping my breathing perfectly steady. You do not have a family, Harrison, I replied, my voice devoid of any warmth or sympathy. You have a collection of greedy parasites who only stayed around because you funded their luxury delusions with stolen money. What exactly do you want from me tonight? He swallowed hard, the sound amplifying awkwardly over the speaker. I saw the tax returns in the courtroom today, Kelsey. I saw the official property deeds. I know you own those 3 luxury residential buildings in Manhattan free and clear. You are sitting on over $100 million in verified liquid assets. I am your father, Kelsey. I gave you life. I need you to go to your bank tomorrow morning and leverage those buildings. You can easily take out a $5 million commercial mortgage against those properties. If you wire me that cash by Wednesday, I can replace the missing client funds before the federal investigators issue a formal arrest warrant. I will pay you back every single penny with interest once the market stabilizes. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh that echoed off the high ceiling of my penthouse. You want me to mortgage my hard-earned real estate empire to save you from federal prison? I asked rhetorically, ensuring the recording captured every single word of his insane extortion attempt. You publicly disowned me. You tried to use my abusive ex-husband to steal my child. You attempted to forge legal documents to steal my inheritance. And now you expect me to hand you $5 million. The answer is absolutely no, Harrison. You will not see a single dime of my money. The desperation on the other end of the line instantly curdled into something far more sinister and completely repulsive. The mask of the humbled father melted away, exposing the true, rotten core of his character. If you will not use the buildings, then you need to use what you have. Kelsey, he hissed, his voice dripping with absolute toxic depravity. You are a beautiful woman. You clearly know how to operate in circles with extremely wealthy men. You need to leverage your physical assets. Put on a tight dress and go entertain some of those billionaire executives you deal with. Go find a few wealthy men and offer them personal favors in exchange for the cash. You owe me this, Kelsey. Use your body to get the money and save this family from total destruction. Do whatever it takes to secure that $5 million by tomorrow night. I looked at the recording app, watching the red timer hit exactly 3 minutes. I had captured every single disgusting syllable of his vile proposition. Harrison, I said, my voice dropping to a chilling, deadly whisper that carried the absolute finality of an executioner. Your career is completely over. I pressed the red button, ending the call and saving the audio file to 3 separate secure cloud servers. I set the phone down on the cold marble and walked back toward the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over my city. The trap was permanently locked. The mighty patriarch had utterly destroyed himself with his own vile words. I took a slow sip of my water, feeling the cool liquid soothe my throat. Tomorrow was going to be an incredibly busy day. and I needed to be perfectly rested for the absolute annihilation of Harrison Wealth Management. I smiled softly into the crisp reflection of the protective glass. The vicious endgame had officially arrived. Deep in the belly of the financial district, a heavy fog rolled through the narrow streets, mirroring the suffocating desperation consuming my father. Harrison pushed open the heavy brass door of an exclusive underground cigar lounge. The dimly lit room smelled of expensive tobacco and impending doom. He bypassed the hostess and walked straight toward a secluded leather booth in the far corner. Waiting in the shadows was my ex-husband Bradley. Harrison slid into the booth, signaling the waiter for a double scotch. He looked entirely wrecked. Bradley leaned forward, darting his eyes nervously. "Do you have the routing numbers?" Bradley whispered, sliding a sleek, encrypted laptop across the polished mahogany table. I contacted my guy in the Cayman Islands. He set up the offshore shell corporation exactly as you requested. The accounts are completely untraceable. Once the funds clear, the federal auditors will never touch a dime. Harrison wiped a bead of cold sweat from his upper lip. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his inner suit pocket. It contained the final access codes to a hidden reserve account. It held $2 million in liquid cash. It was his absolute last lifeline. It was the only money he had left to flee the country and escape the catastrophic federal indictment looming over his head. "I am transferring everything we have left." Harrison muttered, his voice shaking with a potent mixture of fear and malice. "Kelsey thinks she has me completely cornered. She thinks she can buy my debt and force me into a prison cell, but she underestimated my survival instincts. We will wire the money tonight, pack a single bag, and be on a private charter flight to the Caribbean before sunrise. She will inherit an empty shell of a company and a mountain of federal investigations." Across town, I stood inside the secure command center of Apex Holdings. The room was bathed in the cool blue light of dozens of massive monitors. My chief legal officer and my lead forensic accountant sat at the primary console, their fingers flying across their keyboards with absolute precision. We had been actively tracking the digital footprint of Harrison for the past 48 hours. When you buy the entire debt portfolio of a corrupt financial firm, you also gain unprecedented legal access to monitor their associated banking activities to prevent capital flight. "We have movement," the forensic accountant stated sharply, breaking the tense silence of the command center. "He is currently logging into the Shadow Reserve account, utilizing a heavily encrypted virtual private network. He is attempting to initiate a massive outbound wire transfer. The destination is a known offshore tax haven in the Cayman Islands." I leaned over the console, watching the digital transaction process in real time. The sheer predictability of his criminal mind was almost insulting. He was behaving exactly like a cornered rat, attempting to scurry into a dark hole with his stolen cheese. He believed he could outsmart my equity firm. "Are the federal injunctions prepared?" I asked, my voice perfectly calm and devoid of any hesitation. The chief legal officer nodded, tapping a thick stack of court documents. "The emergency orders were signed 10 minutes ago. We proved establishing a high flight risk and imminent dissipation of stolen client funds. We have the absolute legal authority to freeze every single financial asset tied to Harrison and Bradley instantly." The monitor displayed a loading bar. Harrison was inputting the final authorization codes to release the $2 million. The money was seconds from vanishing. "Execute the freeze command," I ordered, my eyes locked on the glowing screen. "Lock them out of everything." Back in the dimly lit cigar lounge, Harrison exhaled a very long and incredibly shaky breath. He typed his secret authorization PIN and forcefully slammed the heavy enter key. He leaned back against the leather booth, waiting for the glorious green confirmation screen that would signal his ultimate escape. Bradley grinned greedily, already calculating his cut of the stolen cash. The sleek laptop screen flickered brightly. A spinning loading icon slowly appeared. Then the screen abruptly flashed a violent bright red. A bold error message dominated the display. "International transaction denied. Account frozen by federal court order." Harrison gasped as if all the oxygen had been violently sucked from the room. He frantically slammed the enter key again and again, his expensive rings clacking loudly against the plastic keyboard. He refreshed the page. He typed the codes faster. Every single attempt yielded the exact same terrifying red screen. "What is happening?" Bradley demanded, his greedy smirk instantly morphing into sheer panic. "What did you do wrong, Harrison? Fix it right now." "I am doing exactly what I am supposed to do," Harrison shouted, his voice cracking as pure terror consumed his entire body. "The system is rejecting the credentials." Bradley snatched the laptop, pulling up his own personal banking application. He tried to log into his checking account to verify his own funds. A similar red error message flashed across his screen. "Personal assets frozen. Contact your financial institution immediately. They are all gone." Harrison whispered, his face turning the color of wet ash. "Every single account. The reserve funds, the offshore links, the personal checking accounts. They locked us out of absolutely everything." The realization hit them simultaneously with the force of a speeding freight train. There was no technical glitch. There was no banking error. The invisible hand of Apex Holdings had reached through the digital void and crushed their final escape route into dust. The trap was perfectly executed. They were sitting in a dark bar with zero cash, zero assets, and zero hope of survival. The heavy, cold iron gates of federal prison had just slammed shut right in front of their terrified faces, and I was the one holding the only absolute key. Bradley stormed out of the dimly lit cigar lounge, leaving a paralyzed Harrison behind. His mind refused to accept the reality of the frozen offshore accounts. He convinced himself it was merely a temporary banking error. To soothe his bruised ego, he hailed a luxury cab to an exclusive underground casino in Manhattan. Bradley strutted past the velvet ropes. He headed straight for the premium bar. He threw a $100 bill on the counter. The loud music and flashing lights of the casino fueled his desperate denial. He spotted a high-stakes baccarat table. He craved the validation of strangers. He sauntered over to the velvet-covered table, ready to buy his way back into supreme dominance. He took the only empty seat at the table. Bradley gave a predatory wink. The dealer, a stoic professional wearing a crisp tuxedo, looked at him and politely requested his initial buy-in. Bradley pulled his sleek metal credit card from his designer wallet and tossed it carelessly onto the green felt. He demanded a $50,000 chip exchange. He wanted everyone to know he was a man of infinite means. The dealer picked up the card and swiped it through the secure terminal built into the table. Bradley took a sip of his bourbon. The machine beeped a harsh, discordant tone. The dealer frowned slightly and swiped the metal card a second time. Another sharp beep echoed over the quiet hum of the high-stakes room. The dealer looked up, handing the card back with a tight, apologetic smile. "I am terribly sorry, sir," the dealer stated smoothly. "Your financial institution has declined the transaction." Bradley felt a sudden hot flash of profound embarrassment burn the back of his neck. He snatched the card from the hand of the dealer. "Run it again, you incompetent fool," Bradley demanded aggressively. "There is absolutely no limit on that account. You must have a broken machine." The surrounding spectators whispered. The pit boss, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, materialized instantly behind the dealer. He took the metal card from the table and ran it through a master terminal. The result was identical. "Sir, your card is completely frozen," the pit boss announced, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I suggest you provide an alternative form of payment or vacate this seat immediately for paying customers." Bradley scrambled frantically, pulling out his leather wallet and dumping every single credit card he possessed onto the table. "Run all of them!" he shouted, his panic completely destroying his suave facade. "Run every single one right now." The pit boss systematically swiped 4 different premium cards. Every single swipe resulted in the exact same terrifying decline notification. Bradley grabbed his hair, his breathing becoming ragged and shallow. The crowd openly laughed at him. They all pointed at his truly pathetic display. Cold sweat dripped down his spine. His manufactured reality shattered completely. He was standing in a room full of genuine billionaires exposed as an absolute fraud. He cursed at the pit boss, demanding to speak to the casino manager, screaming that he was going to sue the establishment for public defamation. He was so consumed by his own pathetic tantrum that he failed to notice the heavy brass doors of the casino swinging wide open very quickly. A team of 6 individuals wearing dark tactical windbreakers over business attire marched directly onto the casino floor. The bright yellow letters printed across their backs read, Federal Agent Internal Revenue Service. They moved with absolute military precision, parting the sea of wealthy gamblers like a sharp blade. 2 uniformed local police officers flanked them, securing the immediate perimeter. The lead federal agent, a tall, imposing man with a stern face, walked straight up to the baccarat table and firmly grabbed the shoulder of Bradley. Bradley, you are under arrest for severe tax evasion, massive wire fraud, and operating an illegal money laundering syndicate. The lead agent declared, his voice booming over the dead silent room. We have an active federal warrant for your immediate detention. Before Bradley could formulate a single lie, 2 agents grabbed his arms and forcefully slammed him against the edge of the velvet table. They kicked his legs apart and violently locked heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. The metal clicked shut with a brutal, satisfying finality. I am a respected businessman, Bradley shrieked wildly as they yanked him upright, his face red with total humiliation. You have no proof. My lawyers will destroy you. The lead agent pulled a thick printed dossier from his jacket. We received an incredibly detailed anonymous corporate leak containing 5 years of your hidden financial records, he replied coldly. We know exactly where you hid the money, and we know exactly who helped you steal it. You have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you start using it immediately. The agents dragged him through the casino floor. Hundreds of elite patrons pulled out their smartphones, recording the spectacular downfall of the arrogant fraud. He kicked and screamed like a petulant toddler, begging for someone to call his father-in-law, but nobody stepped forward. The heavy doors slammed shut behind him, permanently sealing his fate. Across the city, I sat in my quiet penthouse, watching the live news alert flash across my tablet screen. The local media was already broadcasting the exclusive footage of his public arrest outside the casino. The flawless dossier my intelligence team compiled had worked perfectly. I took a slow sip of my sparkling water, enjoying the beautiful silence of my home. The very first link in the toxic chain was completely obliterated. Bradley was gone, and he was never coming back. The entire empire they built on stolen money was collapsing around them. I set the tablet down and looked at the city lights. Just one parasite down and a few more to go. I smiled softly, knowing the absolute best part was still yet to come. The morning after the spectacular public arrest of Bradley, the atmosphere inside the sprawling suburban mansion of Harrison was utterly suffocating. Harrison sat completely alone in his dark mahogany study. He stared blankly at the large flat-screen television mounted on the wall. The local news stations were playing the footage of his former son-in-law being dragged out of the casino in heavy steel handcuffs on a continuous loop. The reporters detailed the massive federal tax evasion and wire fraud charges. They mentioned that the authorities received an anonymous, flawless corporate dossier that exposed the entire illegal operation. Harrison felt a cold, paralyzing sweat break out across his entire body. He knew with absolute certainty that he was the next target on that invisible execution list. His smartphone lay silent on the desk. Not a single person from his elite social circle had called to check on him. The wealthy politicians, the arrogant country club board members, and the powerful venture capitalists had all completely abandoned him. The terrifying mandate from Apex Holdings had worked flawlessly. He was entirely isolated and trapped in a sinking ship of his own making. He looked at his shaking hands. The pristine, manicured fingers of a man who had never done a day of honest hard work in his entire life were now trembling like dry leaves in a winter storm. Harrison opened his encrypted laptop. His breathing was shallow and ragged. He navigated to the minimalist corporate website of Apex Holdings. There was no physical address listed and no names of any executive board members. There was only a single generic encrypted contact portal. He swallowed his massive pride, forcing himself to accept his complete and utter defeat. He opened a new message window and began typing the most humiliating words of his entire arrogant existence. To the chief executive officer of Apex Holdings, he typed his fingers, missing the keys multiple times due to his severe panic. I am writing this to formally surrender. I recognize that you have successfully acquired all of my commercial debt and systematically dismantled my entire professional network. You have completely won this corporate war. I am officially waving the white flag. I am begging you for a shred of professional mercy. He paused, staring at the glowing screen while a single tear of pure pathetic self-pity rolled down his wrinkled cheek. He wiped it away angrily and continued typing his desperate plea. I am fully prepared to sign over absolutely everything I own to your firm. I will give you full, undisputed ownership of my wealth management company. I will hand over the deeds to my personal suburban estate, my luxury vehicles, and every single remaining liquid asset I possess. I will cooperate fully with any financial transition you demand. In exchange, I am simply asking for a private agreement to withhold your evidence from the federal authorities. Please do not send me to a federal prison. My wife and children would not survive the absolute public disgrace of a criminal trial. I humbly request a face-to-face meeting at my estate to finalize this unconditional surrender. Please tell me your terms. Harrison hit the send button. The email vanished into the digital void. He closed the laptop and buried his face in his hands, sobbing quietly into the silent, empty room. The great patriarch who had ruthlessly discarded his own pregnant daughter for bringing a perceived slight to his reputation was now begging an anonymous stranger for his physical freedom. Miles away, high above the bustling streets of Manhattan, I sat at my sleek glass desk, reviewing the latest quarterly projections for my real estate portfolio. The sun illuminated my spacious office, casting a warm glow over the silver-framed photo of Leo, smiling brightly from his recent school play. The heavy glass door of my office chimed softly. My executive assistant stepped into the room holding a secure digital tablet. She wore a sharp professional suit and maintained a perfectly neutral expression. We just received a highly sensitive communication through the primary corporate portal, she stated, walking over to my desk and placing the tablet directly in front of me. It is a direct message from Harrison. He is attempting to initiate a full unconditional surrender to the firm. I picked up the tablet and slowly read the words on the screen. A wave of profound, intense satisfaction washed over my entire being. I read the pathetic, groveling sentences, absorbing every single ounce of his absolute desperation. He was offering to hand over his entire life, his home, his cars, his fake empire, just to save his own miserable skin from the federal authorities. He even had the audacity to use his wife and children as a pathetic excuse for mercy, pretending he cared about their public disgrace, when he was the one who funded their toxic vanity with stolen money. He was terrified, broken, and completely out of options. The man who had sneered at me and told me I was a useless burden was now on his digital knees begging for his life. He had no idea that the anonymous titan he was groveling to was the exact same woman he had kicked out into the cold. I set the tablet down and leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair. I looked at my assistant, maintaining my cold, calculated composure. "This is exactly what we have been waiting for," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "He is completely broken and ready to hand over the keys to his own destruction. I want you to send a brief response," I ordered. "Do not negotiate. Just tell him that our chief executive officer will personally arrive at 3 p.m. this coming Friday." She nodded quickly and typed the message. The execution was set. He would spend the next few days sweating in absolute terror, waiting for his ruthless master to arrive. I smiled. His downfall was here. Friday afternoon arrived with a mocking brilliance. The sky over the sprawling suburban estate was a pristine, cloudless blue, completely at odds with the suffocating terror festering inside the mansion. Harrison paced relentlessly across the grand marble foyer. He had spent the entire morning barking tyrannical orders at his shattered family, forcing them into a humiliating dress rehearsal for their own financial execution. He demanded absolute visual perfection. If they were going to surrender their entire existence to a ruthless corporate titan, They were going to look like highly valuable assets while doing it. Barbara stood near the sweeping mahogany staircase, trembling inside her custom-tailored cream silk dress. The garment had cost her $8,000 last spring, but today it felt like a suffocating shroud. She had spent 2 grueling hours applying thick layers of premium cosmetics to mask the dark hollow circles under her eyes. She wore her most expensive diamond necklace, desperately clinging to the physical manifestation of her crumbling social status. Her hands gripped a small velvet clutch so tightly her knuckles were entirely white. Cameron shifted uncomfortably beside his mother, his breathing shallow and rapid. He wore a sharp imported charcoal suit that failed to hide his pathetic physical state. He had not slept a single minute since the underground syndicate explicitly threatened his life. His eyes darted toward the tall front windows, every few seconds terrified that the incoming vehicles might belong to violent debt collectors rather than a corporate executive. He smoothed his silk tie, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror, praying his manufactured Playboy image would somehow save him from the brutal consequences of his staggering incompetence. Ashley stood on the opposite side of the foyer, completely devoid of her usual arrogant snark. The devastating cancellation of her high society wedding had broken her spirit completely. She wore a modest navy blue designer dress, explicitly chosen by Harrison to project an image of conservative humility. Her normally flawless hair was pulled back into a severe tight bun. She looked entirely miserable, staring blankly at the polished marble floor while silently mourning her lost billionaire future. The toxic siblings who had violently torn each other apart just days ago were now united by pure, unadulterated fear. "Listen to me very carefully," Harrison barked, his voice echoing sharply off the high, vaulted ceilings. He adjusted his platinum cufflinks, trying to project authority he no longer possessed. "The chief executive officer of Apex Holdings will drive through those security gates in exactly 15 minutes. This individual controls our absolute survival. They hold the undeniable power to send me to a federal penitentiary and throw the rest of you directly onto the street. We will not give them a single reason to execute that power today." He marched down the line of his family, inspecting them like livestock prepared for a high-stakes auction. "When the front door opens, you will stand perfectly straight," Harrison commanded, his face red with manic desperation. "You will keep your hands at your sides. You will immediately bow your heads in a display of total absolute respect. Do not make direct eye contact unless you are explicitly spoken to first. If they ask you a question, you will answer with complete deference. You will use the words sir or madam for every single response. You will smile politely. You will nod agreeably. You will be the absolute picture of a grateful, cooperative, and dignified family ready to facilitate a smooth financial transition." Barbara let out a quiet, pathetic whimper. "Are we truly going to hand over the keys to this entire house, Harrison?" she asked, her voice cracking with suppressed hysteria. "We hosted the country club charity gala in this very foyer. My friends will see the moving trucks. How will we ever show our faces in this town again?" Harrison turned on her, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and intense panic. "Do you prefer a public criminal trial, Barbara?" he hissed venomously, stepping close to her trembling face. "Do you prefer the federal agents dragging me out of this house in chains while the news cameras broadcast our absolute destruction to the entire world? We are surrendering the property to buy my physical freedom. You will smile, and you will gladly hand over the keys, or we will all burn together in a federal court." The harsh reality of his words slammed into the silent room, ending any further arguments. They were completely at the mercy of an anonymous corporate ghost. The invisible titan who had effortlessly crushed their commercial banking lines, blacklisted them across Wall Street, and intercepted their offshore wire transfers, was coming to collect their souls. They were nothing but desperate beggars waiting for their new master to arrive. The towering grandfather clock in the adjacent hallway began to chime. It was exactly 2:45 in the afternoon. The loud, rhythmic echoing of the heavy brass pendulum sounded like a slow, steady heartbeat, counting down to their ultimate doom. Cameron wiped a bead of cold sweat from his forehead. His knees felt incredibly weak. Ashley closed her eyes, fighting back a wave of intense nausea. Barbara stood completely rigid, holding her breath entirely. Harrison stared fixedly at the heavy mahogany front door, his jaw clenched so tightly, his teeth ground together. The oppressive silence in the grand foyer was absolute agony. Every passing second stretched into an eternity of psychological torture. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a picture-perfect portrait of a wealthy elite family, reduced to utterly pathetic groveling pawns. They waited in agonizing suspense, completely ready to sell their pride, their home, and their dignity to save their shattered, fraudulent empire. The life raft was coming, and they were fully prepared to sink to their knees and beg the absolute stranger to let them climb aboard. The heavy iron security gates at the edge of the property suddenly hummed to life. Their final moment of reckoning had arrived. The heavy iron security gates at the edge of the sprawling suburban property swung open with a loud mechanical groan. The towering grandfather clock in the grand hallway struck exactly 3 in the afternoon. The deep reverberating chimes echoed through the massive foyer, perfectly synchronized with the harsh crunch of heavy tires rolling onto the pristine gravel driveway. Harrison stiffened his rigid spine, smoothing his imported silk tie one final time. He ordered his trembling family to stand in a perfectly straight line, ensuring their physical posture reflected absolute total submission. Barbara clasped her shaking hands tightly in front of her custom-tailored dress, her knuckles completely white. Cameron swallowed hard, his terrified eyes darting frantically toward the large glass panes. Ashley stood frozen, completely paralyzed by the impending inevitable doom. Through the massive front windows, they watched a terrifyingly coordinated convoy enter their sacred territory. 4 identical matte black bulletproof sport utility vehicles glided up the circular driveway with predatory grace. The massive vehicles moved in absolute unison, projecting a suffocating aura of overwhelming institutional power. They parked in a flawless, aggressive formation, directly blocking the main entrance of the mansion. The deep, threatening hum of their massive engines vibrated violently through the very foundation of the estate. "This is it," Harrison hissed over his shoulder, his voice cracking with pure, unfiltered panic. "Do exactly as I instructed. Keep your heads bowed down, and do not speak unless explicitly spoken to first. Remember, our entire survival depends entirely on this specific moment. We must project absolute gratitude and total compliance to this executive." Harrison stepped forward, pulling the heavy mahogany double doors wide open. The crisp afternoon air swept into the foyer, bringing with it the distinct, intimidating smell of expensive vehicle exhaust. He plastered a sickeningly eager, ingratiating smile across his sweating face. He bent his waist in a deep, pathetic bow, completely ready to greet the anonymous corporate titan who held his physical freedom and entire financial future in their invisible hands. The tinted rear door of the lead vehicle slowly swung open. A single polished black stiletto heel stepped out onto the pristine paving stones. Harrison kept his head respectfully lowered, waiting for the powerful chief executive officer of Apex Holdings to fully emerge. A striking figure stepped out of the heavy armored vehicle, and the sharp, rhythmic click of stiletto heels approached the marble steps. Harrison slowly raised his eyes, his ingratiating smile fully prepared to deliver his meticulously rehearsed speech of absolute unconditional surrender to his new corporate master. His pathetic, ingratiating smile instantly froze. The warm blood drained entirely from his face, leaving his skin the ghastly color of dirty ash. His mouth opened, but absolutely no sound escaped his paralyzed throat. Standing majestically at the bottom of his grand marble staircase was not an aging Wall Street titan. It was Kelsey. I wore a razor-sharp, custom-tailored charcoal power suit that radiated supreme, absolute authority. My posture was flawless, my gaze cold and entirely devoid of any human mercy. I looked nothing like the struggling, desperate single mother he had viciously mocked at his Michelin star birthday dinner. I looked exactly like an apex predator who had successfully cornered her heavily bleeding prey. Barbara let out a sharp, confused gasp, clutching her expensive diamond necklace in sheer disbelief. Cameron blinked rapidly, violently, rubbing his eyes as if desperately trying to clear a bizarre hallucination from his vision. Ashley simply stared, her jaw dropping in absolute profound bewilderment. They genuinely believed I had somehow discovered their secret meeting and arrived to beg for money or sabotage their delicate financial surrender. They simply could not comprehend the terrifying reality standing right in front of them. "What are you doing here?" Harrison finally managed to stammer, his voice reduced to a weak, pathetic whisper. "You cannot be here right now, Kelsey. The chief executive officer of Apex Holdings is arriving at any second. You are going to ruin absolutely everything for us. Get off my property immediately before they see you and destroy this family." I did not move a single muscle. I stood at the base of the stairs staring directly up at the pathetic, groveling patriarch. I did not speak a word. I simply raised my right hand into the air and snapped my fingers exactly once. That single sharp sound echoed like a brutal gunshot across the quiet, sprawling estate. Instantly, the heavy, reinforced doors of the remaining 3 black vehicles swung open in perfect, terrifying unison. My men stepped out onto the driveway. First came my elite private security detail, 8 massive, formidable men wearing crisp black suits and dark sunglasses, moving with flawless, tactical military precision. They flanked me immediately, securing the entire perimeter of the estate with silent, ruthless efficiency, cutting off any potential escape routes. But the private security team was just the beginning of the waking nightmare for the Harrison family. Behind my personal guards, a second wave of highly trained individuals emerged from the heavy bulletproof vehicles. They did not wear tailored corporate business suits. They wore dark tactical windbreakers with bold yellow lettering printed heavily across their chests and backs. Half of the tactical team wore jackets displaying the terrifying acronym of the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. The other half wore the distinct, intimidating tactical gear of the United States Marshals Service. Several of the grim-faced federal agents carried heavy-duty metallic battering rams, while others unclipped thick steel handcuffs from their black utility belts. The bewildered, arrogant confusion on the faces of my toxic family instantly morphed into pure, unadulterated, white-hot terror. The absolute brutal reality of their horrific situation finally penetrated their thick, arrogant skulls. Barbara let out a piercing, guttural shriek, her weak knees buckling entirely beneath her trembling frame. She collapsed heavily onto the polished marble floor of the foyer, completely ruining her expensive silk dress as she scrambled backward away from the open doorway like a terrified animal. Cameron staggered backward violently, clutching his chest, as if he had just suffered a massive heart attack, his rapid breath coming in short, panicked wheezes. Ashley simply froze, completely paralyzed, her eyes extremely wide with a profound, visceral horror as she stared blankly at the federal agents marching aggressively up their pristine suburban driveway. Harrison remained frozen in the grand doorway, his body swaying slightly as if struck by invisible physical blows. He looked at the federal agents carrying official federal arrest warrants. He looked at the heavily armed United States Marshals securing his sprawling property. Then he looked back at me, his eyes bulging wide with a horrifying, devastating realization that shattered his entire universe. The massive, ruthless private equity firm, the flawless corporate execution, the total destruction of his exclusive banking network, the aggressive hostile takeover of his commercial debt, all of it was me. I walked slowly up the grand marble staircase, my sharp heels striking the stone with the heavy, undeniable finality of a supreme judge bringing down a wooden gavel. The federal agents matched my deliberate pace, forming an impenetrable wall of absolute legal authority directly behind me. I stopped on the top marble steps, standing mere inches away from the trembling, broken old man who had proudly called me a pathetic failure. I looked down at the pathetic, shivering, miserable line of my biological family. Their designer clothes and expensive stolen jewelry meant absolutely nothing now. They were nothing but desperate cornered criminals waiting for the executioner to speak. I met the terrified, bloodshot eyes of Harrison watching the very last shred of his pathetic, arrogant soul wither and die under my cold, calculating gaze. He opened his mouth to beg for mercy, but the absolute sheer terror paralyzed his vocal cords, entirely locking him forever in a dark, miserable prison of his own making. "Looking for someone, Harrison?" I asked. my voice slicing through the tense air like a sharpened blade. I stepped onto the marble stair, leveling my cold gaze directly into his terrified eyes. The grand patriarch of this household, the man who loudly proclaimed I was a useless burden at his luxurious birthday dinner, was now violently trembling before me. His mouth opened and closed in rapid succession, resembling a suffocating fish. He tried to formulate a single coherent sentence, but his vocal cords were completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his nightmare. He simply could not comprehend that the anonymous titan he had begged for mercy was his discarded daughter. I raised my right hand, grasping a heavy folder containing the incorporation documents and complete debt acquisition portfolios of Apex Holdings. I thrust my arm forward and threw the massive file directly into his chest. The heavy folder struck him hard, forcing him to stumble backward against the doorframe. He scrambled clumsily to catch the slipping documents. The folder burst open, spilling crisp legal papers across the pristine entryway. His frantic eyes darted downward, locking onto the bold ink of the executive signature line. He saw my full legal name printed flawlessly above the title of Chief Executive Officer. The remaining color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a decaying hollow ghost. He looked up to my face, his reality shattering into pieces. I did not wait for his pathetic breakdown. I stepped right past his trembling frame, crossing the threshold of the mansion with the absolute authority of a conquering general. My stiletto heels clicked rhythmically against the polished marble floor, echoing powerfully through the foyer. The federal agents and my private security detail flooded into the house directly behind me, forming an impenetrable wall of dark suits and tactical gear. I walked straight into the center of the massive formal living room, stopping perfectly in front of the ornate fireplace. Barbara let out a sharp gasp, scrambling backward on the floor until her back hit the base of the sweeping staircase. Cameron cowed behind a velvet armchair, pulling his knees to his chest. Ashley remained frozen near the grand piano, her tear-streaked face twisted into a mask of pure horror. They stared at me, taking in my tailored charcoal suit, my flawless posture, and the terrifying army of federal authorities standing rigidly at my command. The absolute sheer dominance of my arrival completely crushed their fragile egos. I turned my attention to the lead commander of my private security detail. My voice was completely devoid of any warmth. "Secure every single exit and confiscate this entire property immediately," I ordered loudly. "Nobody steps foot outside this house without my explicit verbal authorization. Lock down the garage and disable all electronic access codes to the security gates." The commander nodded sharply instantly, barking tactical orders to his subordinates. The men in black suits fanned out across the lower level, executing my directives with ruthless precision. I turned my cold gaze back to the shivering group of people who used to be my family. "You have exactly 30 minutes to pack your belongings," I stated, my voice ringing with brutal absolute finality. "You are permitted to take exactly one standard-sized suitcase of basic clothing per person. You will pack standard everyday apparel only. My men will thoroughly inspect every single bag before you cross the threshold." I stepped closer to Barbara, watching her flinch away from my shadow. "Let me make my terms absolutely crystal clear." I continued, lowering my tone to a chilling whisper. "You are prohibited from taking any designer handbags. You are forbidden from packing any expensive watches, tailored luxury suits, or high-end electronics. Absolutely no jewelry or valuable assets of any kind will leave this building. Every single diamond ring, every pearl necklace, and every piece of original artwork now legally belongs to Apex Holdings to cover the massive $15 million deficit your pathetic husband accumulated. If my men find a single unauthorized item hidden in your luggage, you will leave this property with absolutely nothing but the clothes currently on your backs." The sheer brutality of my conditions hit them like a physical shockwave. Barbara immediately began to sob hysterically, clutching the heavy diamond necklace resting against her collarbone. "You cannot do this to us, Kelsey," she wailed, her voice cracking with pure pathetic desperation. "These are family heirlooms. You are stripping us of our entire identity. We will have absolutely nothing left." I stared down at her weeping form, feeling a profound, intense wave of ultimate satisfaction. You stripped me of my identity, the day you threw me and my unborn son onto the street, I replied coldly. You told the entire world I was a failure because it suited your toxic elite narrative. Your fake identity was funded by stolen money, and now the bill is officially due. Cameron finally found his weak voice, standing up from behind the velvet chair. You are a complete monster, he shouted weakly, his hands shaking violently as he pointed a finger at my chest. You are actually going to throw your own flesh and blood into the gutter over money. I turned my head slowly, fixing him with a glare that instantly silenced his pathetic outburst. I am simply enforcing the legal boundaries of a hostile corporate takeover, Cameron, I stated smoothly. You wanted to play the role of a wealthy, untouchable elite while squandering millions. Now you get to experience the brutal reality of total bankruptcy. The 30-minute countdown has officially started. I suggest you stop wasting your breath and start packing your cheap socks before I decide to revoke the suitcase privilege entirely. The security commander stepped forward, tapping his tactical wristwatch purposefully. The loud ticking of the grand hallway clock suddenly felt deafening. Panic fully consumed them. Ashley let out a wail and sprinted up the staircase. Cameron scrambled after her, tripping over his shoes. The massive foyer descended into absolute pandemonium as the countdown timer ticked away their final minutes of luxurious delusion. Barbara remained sprawled on the cold marble floor, her expensive silk dress completely ruined by her pathetic flailing. Losing her country club status and sprawling estate finally shattered her aristocratic facade. She scrambled forward on her hands and knees, leaking thick black tears down her pale cheeks. She lunged violently, wrapping her trembling arms around my tailored suit pants. She buried her sobbing face against my legs, begging for a shred of the mercy she had denied me for decades. Kelsey, please listen to me. Barbara wailed, her voice a screech of pure desperation. I never wanted to throw you out of the house. I was just a victim of your father. Harrison forced me to go along with his cruel punishments. He controlled all the finances and he threatened to cut me off if I ever tried to contact you or help you with Leo. He is a monster. He stole that money to fund his arrogant ego. You cannot punish me for his crimes. I am your mother. Please let me stay in the house. I will be the mother you always needed. I looked down at the weeping woman clinging to my legs, feeling nothing but profound disgust. She was perfectly willing to throw her husband under the wheels of a train just to save her comfortable lifestyle. I reached down, grabbing her wrists with a firm, unyielding grip, and peeled her hands off my suit. Do not ever touch me again, I commanded, my voice echoing like ice cracking across a frozen lake. You were not a helpless victim, Barbara. You were an enthusiastic participant in my destruction. You stood at that Michelin restaurant and laughed while Harrison publicly labeled me a massive failure. You wore the diamonds bought with stolen client funds. You enabled his toxicity because you worshipped his wallet. You are just a parasite desperately searching for a new host to bleed dry, but my bank accounts are permanently closed to you. Get off the floor and go pack your single suitcase before I instruct my security team to physically throw you out the front door empty-handed. As Barbara collapsed into a fresh wave of hysterical sobbing, heavy footsteps echoed down the grand mahogany staircase. Cameron and Ashley descended, carrying one basic suitcase each. The sheer panic of losing everything had instantly dissolved their sibling loyalty. They had spent their entire lives united only by their mutual disdain for me, but now they were viciously turning on each other like starving wolves fighting over a scrap of meat. This is entirely your fault, you pathetic loser! Ashley shrieked at Cameron, shoving his shoulders so hard he nearly dropped his bag. You blew millions of dollars on fake tech startups and sports cars. You drained the accounts of Dad dry playing pretend businessman. If you had just gotten a real job instead of acting like a spoiled brat, he never would have needed to steal from his wealthy clients. You ruined my engagement. You ruined my entire life. Cameron shoved her back, his face purple with intense, blinding rage. Shut your mouth, you useless plastic doll, he roared, stepping aggressively into her personal space. You burned through hundreds of thousands of dollars on designer clothes and luxury vacations in Europe. You never worked a single day in your miserable life. Dad had to commit federal wire fraud just to pay off your massive credit card debts. You are the reason the federal auditors are standing in our living room right now." They turned their venomous fury toward their parents, entirely abandoning any lingering shred of familial respect. "You are both completely disgusting," Cameron screamed at Harrison and Barbara. "You raised us to believe we were untouchable royalty, and now you are making us homeless. You are supposed to protect us, but you are just bankrupt criminals. I absolutely hate both of you." Harrison stood near the center of the foyer, vibrating with a dark, lethal intensity. The complete breakdown of his perfect family, the insubordination of his golden children, and the absolute humiliating dominance of his discarded daughter finally pushed his fragile sanity over the edge. His entire identity was tied to his wealth and his power, and I had methodically crushed both into fine dust. He locked his bloodshot eyes directly on me. The last thread of his rational mind snapped completely. He let out a deafening primal roar of pure, unadulterated hatred. He charged forward, his large hands curled into tight, violent fists, aiming a lethal blow directly at my face. He wanted to physically destroy the woman who had conquered his empire. I did not even blink. I stood my ground, fully aware of the highly trained tactical wall standing right behind me. Before Harrison could close the distance, two massive United States Marshals intercepted his violent charge. They moved with terrifying explosive speed. The lead agent tackled Harrison, driving a heavy shoulder directly into the chest of the patriarch. They crashed heavily onto the polished marble floor. The second federal agent immediately dropped his knee onto the back of Harrison, pinning him forcefully against the cold stone. The sharp click of heavy steel handcuffs echoed loudly. "Harrison, you are under formal arrest for severe federal financial fraud," the lead agent declared, reading the strict legal mandate. I walked slowly across the marble floor, stepping over the pathetic, whimpering forms of my shattered family. I entered the opulent study and approached the massive mahogany desk. I turned and slowly lowered myself into the familiar, expensive leather executive chair. I looked through the doors, staring down at Harrison, who lay pinned on the ground. "You were completely right, Dad," I stated, my voice icy and precise. "There is absolutely no place for a pathetic failure in this family." I leaned forward, watching his eyes widen in terror. "And that failure is you." I stood up from the heavy leather executive chair. The expensive mahogany desk that served as the command center for decades of arrogance was now just another seized asset in my corporate portfolio. I smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit and walked out of the study. The grand foyer of the suburban estate was a chaotic symphony of absolute destruction. Two federal agents were aggressively dragging Harrison through the front doors. He kicked and thrashed against the heavy steel handcuffs binding his wrists, but his resistance was entirely futile. The flashing red and blue lights of the federal cruisers parked in the circular driveway violently illuminated his pale, terrified face. His frantic eyes locked onto mine one final time as the agents shoved his head down and forced him into the back of the armored transport vehicle. The heavy door slammed shut permanently, sealing away the man who had mercilessly cast me out into the cold. Barbara remained collapsed on the marble floor, clutching her single permitted suitcase. Her expensive silk dress was stained with tears. She wailed inconsolably, watching her entire manufactured reality drive away in police custody. Cameron and Ashley stood shivering on the front steps, gripping their cheap travel bags. Stripped of their designer wardrobes, their luxury vehicles, and their unlimited credit lines, they looked exactly like what they truly were. They were helpless, dependent adults, completely incapable of surviving in the real world. They glared at each other, exchanging bitter, venomous whispers, but they did not dare look in my direction. I walked past my ruined biological family without breaking my stride. I did not offer a single word of parting advice. I did not offer a shred of pity. They had made their ruthless choices years ago when they deemed my unborn child a shameful burden. My elite private security detail parted respectfully, allowing me to walk down the marble steps and enter the crisp afternoon air. Behind me, I heard the sharp, authoritative voice of a federal marshal commanding Barbara to vacate the premises immediately. The heavy mahogany front doors were aggressively pulled shut. The loud metallic echo of the deadbolts locking sounded like pure music to my ears. A bright orange federal seizure notice was slapped directly across the pristine wood, officially condemning the fraudulent fortress. I instructed my security commander to handle the remaining asset liquidation protocols. I slid into the driver's seat of my own sleek black sedan and started the engine. As I drove away from the sprawling estate, I rolled the windows down, letting the cool, rushing wind sweep through the cabin. The suffocating, toxic weight I had carried tightly in my chest for 33 years instantly evaporated. I was completely unburdened. The desperate, broken girl who had cried herself to sleep begging for basic parental validation was entirely gone. In her place sat a financially invincible, emotionally impenetrable woman who had masterfully executed the ultimate corporate and personal reckoning. The drive back to Manhattan felt like crossing a bridge between two entirely different lifetimes. I navigated the familiar bustling streets heading straight toward the private elementary school. I parked a block away, taking a moment to check my reflection in the rearview mirror. My charcoal suit remained impeccably sharp. My posture was flawless. There was absolutely no trace of the brutal family execution I had just orchestrated. The final school bell rang, sending a joyful, chaotic wave of children flooding through the iron gates. I stepped out of the vehicle and walked toward the courtyard. I spotted Leo almost immediately. His bright, eager eyes scanned the crowd of waiting parents before locking onto me. A massive, brilliant smile erupted across his face. He sprinted toward me, his small backpack bouncing wildly against his shoulders. I dropped to one knee, catching him in a tight, fierce embrace. I breathed in the familiar, sweet scent of his hair, feeling a profound, overwhelming surge of pure, unconditional love. This was my real family. This was the only bloodline that actually mattered. We walked hand in hand to his favorite corner ice cream parlor. I bought him a massive double scoop of chocolate fudge, holding the napkin as he eagerly devoured the sweet treat. He sat swinging his legs happily on the park bench, completely untouched by the darkness I had just permanently eradicated from our lives. He paused mid-bite, looking up at me with his large, observant brown eyes. He tilted his head, studying my tailored suit and my pristine appearance. "Mommy, where did you go today?" he asked, his voice ringing with sweet, innocent curiosity. "Why are you dressed looking so incredibly cool today?" I smiled softly, reaching out to gently, affectionately ruffle his soft hair. "Mommy just had to go clean up a massive pile of garbage, my sweet boy," I replied, my voice radiating absolute serene warmth. "It was a very big mess, but it is entirely gone now. From today onward, our home is only going to have fresh, clean, beautiful air." Leo grinned widely, fully accepting the simple explanation, before happily returning to his melting chocolate ice cream. I wrapped my arm protectively around his small shoulders, looking out at the bright sun shining over the bustling city skyline. The heavy, dark storm clouds of my past were permanently destroyed, and the horizon ahead was absolutely clear. My name is Minnu Da Trang, and I want to thank you for joining me on this incredible journey of absolute redemption and ultimate justice. Let this story serve as a permanent reminder that sharing biology with someone does not give them the automatic right to destroy your peace. Family is built on mutual respect, unwavering loyalty, and unconditional support, not manipulation and financial abuse. You always have the absolute power to draw a hard line, to walk away from toxic environments, and to ruthlessly build your own magnificent empire from the ground up. Never let anyone convince you that your independence is a failure. Your autonomy is your greatest weapon. If you have ever had to set a firm boundary to protect your own peace and your own children, please let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button, share this video with anyone who needs a strong reminder of their own worth, and subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories of women taking back their lives. Do not ever let anyone else hold the pen. The most profound lesson we can extract from this incredible journey is that sharing biology with someone does not automatically grant them a lifelong access pass to your life or your peace of mind. Society constantly pushes the toxic narrative that family is everything, and that we must blindly forgive blood relatives regardless of how deeply they betray us. But the reality is far more brutal and incredibly liberating. Toxic individuals remain toxic even if they happen to be your parents or your siblings. When the very people who are supposed to protect you actively choose to throw you to the wolves, they permanently forfeit their right to your loyalty and your love. True supreme power comes from absolute financial and emotional independence. When you become entirely self-sufficient, you permanently strip your abusers of their favorite weapon, which is control. Building your own empire from the absolute ground up is not just about accumulating massive wealth. It is about constructing an impenetrable fortress around your fragile heart and securing a safe future for your children. You never have to accept the pathetic false narratives others try to force upon you. You do not have to be the miserable failure they desperately want you to be, just to make their own hollow lives feel superior. The absolute best revenge is not screaming or begging for their basic validation. The greatest revenge is becoming so undeniably successful and so completely untouchable that their pathetic opinions no longer matter at all. You must learn to cut the dead weight from your life gracefully and ruthlessly. You replace the broken family you were given with the beautiful family you choose to build. Your worth is never defined by those who were too incredibly blind to see your potential. It is defined solely by the magnificent empire you build from the ashes after they walk away. If you have ever walked away from a toxic environment to build your own glorious empire, hit that subscribe button and share your powerful story in the comments below to inspire others.